Hello, the story I want to tell you today takes place in the Ural Mountains. The Ural Mountains are the boundary between Europe and Asia. The mountain range begins from the coast of Canada in the Arctic Ocean and stretches to the valley of the Yudin River, with a total length of over 2,500 kilometers and an average height ranging from 1,000 to 1,300 meters. The highest peak is Mount Narodnaya, standing at 1,895 meters. The Ural Mountains are covered in snow almost all year round, attracting mountain enthusiasts and adventurous expeditions seeking to conquer its dangers. One of the most bizarre and terrifying events of the 20th century is the mysterious incident related to the tragic deaths of 9 Russian mountaineers on the Dyatlov Pass. To this day, the case remains unsolved despite more than half a century of efforts by scientists, analysts, and investigators from various countries to study and unravel the mystery. Now, let's begin the story of one of the most enigmatic cases in history. The expedition into the wilderness can be an exciting experience for those who love to explore and travel, but for the mountaineering team from the Ural Polytechnic Institute, it became a journey of no return. On January 25, 1959, a ski instructor along with 3 engineers and 7 students from the Ural Polytechnic Institute embarked on a daring expedition to conquer the Otorten mountain range in the northern part of the Ural Mountains. The leader of the mountaineering team was Igor Dyatlov, a lively and enthusiastic 23-year-old. He organized the journey for individuals with a passion for adventurous mountaineering, aiming to create a realistic environment for physical training and mental preparation for more challenging and demanding expeditions in the future. As the group left the railway station and prepared to board the bus heading towards the Ural Mountains, one member of the team, Yuri Yudin, felt unwell and had to stay behind for recuperation in the town of Vizhai. Bid farewell to his teammates, Yudin watched them gradually distance themselves with a tinge of envy, unaware of how fortunate he would be as the only member who would not meet a tragic fate on the cold mountainous terrain. In the years that followed, Yudin was haunted by the thought of not being able to discover the force that had claimed the lives of his companions. 2 days later, the young group of 9 mountaineers, including mountaineering instructor Alexander Zolotarev, engineers Rustam Slobodin, Georgii Krivonischenko, and Nicholas Thibault-Brignolel, along with students Yuri Doroshenko, Zinaida Kolmogorova, and Ludmila Dubinina, followed their team leader Dyatlov as they set forth towards the first stop in their mountainous journey, Gora Otorten. The fateful journey began on the evening of January 28, 1959, but none of them reached their destination, and not a single one survived to return. According to the schedule, Dyatlov's expedition team was supposed to take only 3 days to ascend the Kholat Peak and return to the town of Vizhai on February 11, 1959. At that time, they would send a radio signal to notify their families of the successful completion of the mission. Initially, when a week had passed without any word from the expedition, most of the families of the mountaineers were not overly concerned, as such long-duration explorations were rarely completed on time. However, as time went on, the families began to feel uneasy. They urged the Ural Polytechnic Institute to organize an immediate search and rescue operation. After several days of search with no results, the military and local authorities got involved. Military planes and helicopters were dispatched to the remote mountainous region for a widespread search. It wasn't until February 25 that a pilot discovered something unusual on the lower slope of the mountain, gradually revealing the first news of the 9 missing individuals. On the very next day, a search unit, including the university student Mikhail Sharavin, began to trace a path up the eastern slope of the mountain with the codename 1079 in the investigation files. This mountain was the dwelling place of the indigenous Mansi people and was locally known as Kholat Syakhl, meaning Dead Mountain. Upon reaching the site of the unusual finding, the rescue team discovered a completely destroyed tent, with scattered footprints of at least 8 individuals in a state of panic, attempting to escape the tent. Sharavin's report described the scene: "We found a torn tent, half covered in snow. Inside, there was nothing but the group's belongings and mountaineering boots." The footprints around the tent were identified as belonging to victims who were not wearing shoes, either barefoot or only wearing socks, fleeing into the snow. 2 individuals seemed to have run down the slope into the dense forest below, but then the rescue team lost their tracks as the snow covered the ground, about 500 meters away from the campsite area. Despite persistent search efforts, Sharavin eventually found traces of charred remains, fire-starting equipment, and the frozen bodies of two members, Doroshenko and Krivonischenko. Heartbreakingly, they were found in a state of undress, with only their underwear on. Scattered around them were some pine tree branches. Later forensic analysis confirmed that the pieces of skin found on the tree trunk next to them belonged to the two victims. It was evident that they had, in a state of horrifying fear, attempted to climb the tree to escape, but their efforts were in vain. At that moment, the rescue team believed that a monster might have appeared, terrifying the mountaineers to the point where they hastily fled without clothing, disregarding the skin-cutting cold, and desperately clung to the trees, tearing their flesh to find a safe shelter. However, the strange thing was that there were no traces of any such creature pursuing them, and the fact that the victims still had time to light a fire for warmth, and their bodies showed no severe injuries, left the investigators puzzled and distressed. Not long after finding the bodies of Doroshenko and Krivonischenko, the search party discovered the body of team leader Dyatlov, about 280 meters away. Dyatlov was found lying on his back, one hand tightly gripping a birch branch while the other hand was stiff and frozen, protecting his head from an unidentified force. One by one, the rescue team discovered the remaining bodies. Partially buried in the snow not far from the tent was the body of Rustam Slobodin, face down on the ground. Slobodin's skull had suffered a long crack, about 20 centimeters long, but medical experts later confirmed that his cause of death was due to hypothermia, not the injury. Zinaida Kolmogorov was found in the farthest position from the campsite. There were bloodstains around her body, but until now, there has been no conclusive evidence to confirm whether the blood belonged to Zinaida Kolmogorov or not. The rescue team also couldn't understand the cause of her death as there were no signs of struggle or resistance. After 2 months of searching, on May 4, 1959, the rescue team discovered the remaining 4 bodies. The bodies of the guide Alexander Zolotaryov, engineer Nicholas Thibault-Brignolel, and 2 students, Alexander Kolevatov and Ludmila Dubanina, were buried under nearly 3 meters of thick snow, gradually revealing themselves as spring arrived. All 4 of them were found dead in a small stream bed. Interestingly, unlike the previously discovered victims 2 months earlier, all 4 of them were fully clothed. Like Slobodin, Thibault-Brignolel's skull had suffered a severe blow, causing a large crack, while Zolotarev and Dubanina's chests were crushed inwards, and several rib bones were fractured. All 4 victims were determined to have died from internal injuries caused by life-threatening wounds, but there were absolutely no bruises or soft tissue damage. During the autopsy of Dubanina, it was even discovered that she had been missing her tongue, eyes, and part of her lips. During the memorial service for the victims, the families of these unfortunate explorers also claimed that the victims' skin had an unusual orange hue. Their hair had lost its pigmentation, turning silver. When investigating the torn tent at the crime scene, all the forensic experts came to the conclusion that the tent was torn from the inside. They proposed the hypothesis that there might have been some extremely horrifying force inside the tent that caused the mountaineers to flee without thinking and tear the tent apart to escape. Among the belongings left behind, the investigation team found several rolls of film and some documents belonging to the mountaineering team. These items not only failed to shed light on the truth but also added to the mystery. Starting the investigation, the first suspicion raised by the investigative team was why Dyatlov and his team chose to set up the tent on a slope exposed to the wind, when less than 1.6 kilometers away was a turn, a safe location that could avoid the harsh weather of Russia. However, that suspicion was quickly explained in Yudin's perspective. Yudin, who did not participate in the trip, explained that team leader Dyatlov probably wanted to camp on the slope to prepare for future expeditions. Among the footage found in the torn tent, there was a photograph capturing the entire expedition at 5 p.m. on February 2, 1959. At that time, they had decided to set up the tent on the slope of Kolitsyakal Mountain, about 16 kilometers away from their first intended destination, the peak of Gorao-Torton. In the photo, they all appeared healthy and cheerful. The investigators continued to determine that dinner was around 7 p.m., and not long after that, they went to sleep. The nighttime temperature on the slope of Kolytsyakhl was around -15 degrees Celsius. It's unclear why many members of the mountaineering team decided not to wear warm clothing while sleeping, leading to a situation where they could only run out of the tent without proper attire when something bad happened. Forensic experts suggested that the attacks on the victims might have occurred between 9:30 p.m. and 11:30 p.m., based on the analysis of the food digestion in the stomachs of the bodies. The investigators suspected that in the darkness of the night, the adventurers had to face a horrifying fear. The team members quickly tore and cut the tent to escape without putting on additional clothing. Following the footprints in the snow around the tent, the team scattered in different directions, all trying to find their teammates after descending the mountain, about 300 meters away from the campsite. The investigative report suggested that when Doroshenko and Krivonischenko found each other, they probably intended to share their clothes. However, the reality was that they themselves had too little clothing, so they decided to group together near the fire to keep warm instead of returning to the tent to get more clothes. Intelligence personnel also began to suspect the motivation behind them climbing the tree. Besides the theory that they were too terrified and wanted to find a hiding place in the tree, it's possible that Doroshenko and Krivonischenko wanted to climb to a higher position to observe the campsite. However, their efforts to climb the tree were in vain, and they succumbed to the cold and died. Meanwhile, Kolmogorova, Slobodin, and Dyatlov seemed brave enough to return to the tent, but all three failed to achieve their goal as they succumbed to the extreme cold. Losing their leader could have disoriented the group, and investigators believed that the remaining four, Zolotaryov, Thibeaux-Brignolel, Kolevatov, and Dubinina, decided to move closer to the nearby forest in hopes of finding shelter. However, all four ended up dying with severe internal injuries, the cause of which remained inexplicable. The last member was determined to have died about 8 hours after the initial incident. After completing the timeline of the tragic events, the investigative team was left with two major questions. Firstly, what was the mysterious force that appeared in the tent, causing the entire expedition team to panic and flee? Secondly, what caused the fatal injuries to the four members? Despite 3 years of investigation, the authorities in the Soviet Union were unable to provide a definitive conclusion for the tragedy. The case was officially closed, but the public continued to propose various hypotheses, causing much debate and speculation. Over half a century has passed, and the enigma surrounding the deaths of the 9 mountaineers still perplexes investigators. The debate continues, and we can only follow a few plausible theories in our quest to uncover the truth behind this harrowing disaster. Thank you for taking the time to watch our video. Please click the like button and subscribe to support us and receive notifications for our latest videos.